Hey everybody, welcome to the last KrakCast news of 2020 right here at the very, very end of December. It's just me and Dr. Mike today because Josh and Dave have lives. Basically, they have other things to do. Dr. Mike, how was your Christmas holiday?
Uneventful, fortunately. Regular family visit, all the food you could eat, Christmas tree and presents. Generally, it worked out all right. What about yourself?
Yeah, it was uneventful. That is definitely the word. It's kind of, sitting at home, which is basically what I've been doing for the last 6 or 7 months already. So nothing really new there. But Santa Claus was good to me. Got some things to do, got some books to read, some games to play. So looking forward to it. Hey, let's dive into the news here. Let's have a quick word about Corona, which interestingly we haven't mentioned in a while. And this is strange because we talked about it basically every week for 5 or 6 months. Quick update on the numbers. They've been all over the place over the last week in terms of new infections. Poland just about to reach 1.3 million total infections since the beginning of the pandemic back in March. Over the last week, the numbers have been as high as 14,000 in a day. And just today, and we're recording this on Sunday the 27th, the numbers for yesterday were just under 4,000. So don't know if this is a reflection of changing testing methods or what's going on, but are these kind of declining numbers and the news of the vaccine coming in just in the next few weeks? Do you take this as a sign that the long-feared winter wave, the second wave of huge numbers of infections is not going to happen, or is anything still possible, or what do you think?
Well, 1.3 million confirmed cases. I think we should also underline these are the officially confirmed cases. I would be confident to say that the number of people who have had coronavirus is probably at least double, if not several times more than that. So we're already talking the point where where it might be that at least 10% of the population has gone through an infection. So we're starting to get to the point where the virus in some circles doesn't have anywhere to go because people have already had it. And usually when you've had it, you're very unlikely to have it again. I mean, there are exceptions to this, but it's only a handful in the whole world. You're saying second wave. I continue to claim that there was never really a first wave in Poland. Since, for desperately for the first few months, they're looking for cases, and it was like a dozen here, a dozen there. That really doesn't count as a wave. What we had starting in the fall here was more appropriately could have been called a wave, and that would be the first wave. But with the vaccines being rolled out in over the course of the next few months, and the fact that so many people have already had coronavirus and have their own natural immunity, I think the numbers will basically start to stabilize now, and if not, drop off. And like you mentioned as well, testing methods have also changed. In Poland, they generally don't test huge amounts of people. They procedures basically are set up such that you test people that have a high likelihood to have corona to begin with. So people with symptoms or who had been in contact with people who had symptoms and were confirmed cases. So that's why, they were always mocking or ridiculing or criticizing for the fact that only, say, 20,000 people were tested in a day and almost half of them at some points had coronavirus. But that was mainly because they weren't going to test people that most likely didn't have coronavirus to begin with. But, I think we will see those numbers go down in the next few weeks and months.
One more thing I wanted to mention on this subject. A few days ago, we had this very, very kind of interesting and weird chapter in the whole corona mess. As many of you listening will know, in the United Kingdom, they have moved to what they call Tier 4 lockdown, like a very serious, the most restrictive stage of lockdowns they have. I mean, everything is closed basically. And at the same time, they also announced the possible arrival of some kind of bizarre and extra strength strain of coronavirus that made everything even stranger. And so basically the UK has become a hotspot for this serious heightened problem in the corona world. And most of Europe banned flights from there. They stopped accepting incoming flights, including Poland, by the way, stopped accepting incoming flights from the UK. And at the same time, we learned that LOT, the national Polish airline, was organizing extra planes to help out the Polish community in the UK return to Poland just before the holidays. So we had this weird situation of, on the one hand, being told that the UK was the epicenter of this horrible new outbreak, And at the same time, this rush, kind of a scramble to import as many people as possible from the UK, living in the UK, to Poland. Dr. Mike, what the hell was going on here? Why? It was like we were hearing two totally conflicting stories at the same time. That just doesn't make sense to me at all.
Yeah, because we live in a world with these kinds of contradictory concepts of, bureaucracy and borders, and juxtaposed to nature and biology, which really doesn't care about those issues. And they want to close down the borders, but you can't snap your fingers and close the border starting now. There are procedures that have to be put into place, and it takes several hours or even a day or two, which is what we saw here. And in the meantime, this is just before Christmas, people want to get home to their loved ones. So they realized that there will be a scramble to get out of the country before these new restrictions went into play. So Lutz sent over its largest planes, the Dreamliners, instead of like the 737s, or I think they also have a handful of like Embraers and like smaller planes to pick up more passengers, more people. And, these flights were fully booked out almost immediately. Tickets were for, an excess of £500. So, we're talking like 5 times more expensive, if not 10 times more expensive than a regular Ryanair flight to Poland, even during the Christmas season. And, everybody wanted to take advantage of this. Another problem was a lot of truck drivers in the UK that carry freight across Europe are Polish. So, they were all also stuck there at the border, not able to get to the ferry or on the train to take their, to go back to mainland Europe, because France also closed its border to the UK. There were about, I heard, about 1,500 Polish drivers stuck out of like some 10,000, apparently, continental drivers that weren't allowed to get out of the UK. And they were stuck on the border with no facilities, no food, anything like that, no idea what was going on. There were some negotiations made that France would let them cross the border, but they had to be tested, and they tested about 10,000 tests, I heard, and they only caught about 24 cases, about 24 cases of coronavirus in that group. That just shows you how small of a threat it was. But you also have to remember, truck drivers generally don't mix with a lot of people. They're in their truck all the time. They deliver and they drive back. They don't go into malls or like populated areas and walk around. But a lot of those drivers, just because there was a backlog, they had no chance to make it back home for the holidays, even because of those 2-3 days that they weren't allowed to cross the border.
Well, I'm definitely sympathetic to Polish people living in the UK who wanted to come home for Christmas, obviously. But at the same time, when we learn a week before Christmas that, you're living in this country where, it's out of control and the government is implementing these new lockdowns, and other countries are saying, sorry, we won't accept any flights coming in from the UK. And Poland is like, yeah, we're not going to accept any flights either, except for these huge airplanes loaded with our citizens. It's just weird. I mean,
Poland wasn't the only country to do that. But
pick one. You can't have both.
Yeah, well, a lot of these restrictions that we've had over the last few months just make no sense when you logically think about it. When it comes to this new strain, though, it was identified several months ago already. I believe September, October is when they first started picking it up. And there have already been cases of it confirmed in other countries outside of the UK. It's just in the UK, it's become a more prevalent one of the strains compared to the other ones that are out there, because there are several coronavirus strains right now going around. And this is just like a newer one that they noticed had behaved slightly differently. I mean, it's when it comes to its fatality or how sick it makes you, doesn't really change the outcomes, but it does seem to jump around more readily. So more people are infected when this strain is put to play. But the fact is, it's already on in continental Europe. I'm guessing it's going to spread around as well. But as we already know, since so many people have already had coronavirus, it just doesn't have too many more places to go. The question is, will this now become just an example? Will there be a mutation that our natural immunity no longer reacts to, like with the flu? So every year we'll have like a new coronavirus that we'll have to be vaccinated for, like when it comes to the flu every year. Or will this burn out in the next couple of months, next couple of years?
Reading about this,
I'm curious to see.
The Dreamliners bringing the Polish people back here. I was reading about it in Gazeta Wyborcza and a couple of other places, and the reader comments were basically 100% on the same side, and the side that says, "What the hell are we doing? Why are we importing this potential problem? All these people should be locked down. Put them all in the national stadium in Warsaw and leave them there for 2 weeks." Most people were not terribly sympathetic about it, and I get it. And so if in a couple of weeks from now, if we do see this news of an outbreak of this strain, this UK strain of Corona in Poland, I think we'll know why. But fingers crossed. Hopefully, we won't have to worry about that. Let's move on to some other stuff. I got so many different topics. I'm not sure how to segue from one to the other here. Let's jump over to something that popped up in the news this past week that kind of goes back to the presidential election from, what was it, in July? I've forgotten when we finally had the election. When was the presidential election? Do you remember? It was supposed to be May.
It was originally supposed to be in May,
August?
And then they switched over. Was it to finally in August was when the president had to, the new president had to be sworn in. The final election was in July.
We should know this, but I think it was July. Anyway, the story kind of goes back to there. Somebody who vandalized, kind of defaced a billboard featuring Andrzej Duda. The guy put a spray painted or hand drawn penis on Duda's forehead. And this is something I have to say, just as an aside, this is something that I saw here in Krakow several hundred times. I think basically every candidate who appears on a campaign poster gets defaced in the same manner with the penis. But anyway, the guy was found guilty of a crime, a suspended sentence, and suspended imprisonment sentence, and given some number of hours of community service to carry out. A lot of people don't know, Dr. Mike, a lot of people don't know that in Poland, defacing or insulting the president, and this kind of vandalism is considered insulting, or insulting the Polish flag and certain other national symbols actually comes with fairly serious criminal penalties, and it is often prosecuted.
That's true. There are laws in the books in Poland when it comes to insulting heads of state or Polish national symbols. It's clearly in black and white written down. And it's also true when it comes to, say, there are regulations about who can use the Polish flag, say, on clothing apparel or sports apparel and stuff like that. You can't just slap it on there. It has to be done legally, and it has to be, fulfill certain requirements about the actual color of the flag, its positioning, any national symbols as well. So it's not like the American flag, which is stuck on T-shirts and things all across the world.
Everything, yeah.
In Poland, yeah, I mean, there was talk in the United States of regulating the flag as well, but decades ago. But of course, with freedom of speech in the United States being clearly spelt out as a guiding principle and as a right in the Constitution, that didn't fly. And most people don't realize that these kinds of laws like we have in Poland exist in many countries to one extent or the other. The United States is the outlier, is the exception to this rule when it comes to freedom of expressions. In the United States, of course, you have also slander, libel laws and things like that. But the go-to position is, first and foremost, you can say what you want to say. That's the assumption in most cases. Well, in most other countries, there are limits to that. I mean, for instance, in Germany, when it comes to using any type of Nazi symbolism, that's verboten. It's always hilarious when
games that get you in trouble.
Yeah, and video games are famous where you have to remove swastikas. Even if you're shooting Nazis, you can't have the Nazi symbol on there, or in cartoons. In the UK, we had a case a few years ago where a man taught his dog to give the Nazi salute to annoy his ex-girlfriend. And he was also prosecuted for that and lost. I mean, he went to court and he lost, which I think is just astonishing. But in Poland, we have the laws basically saying that anything that insults a head of state, which includes the Polish president and politicians, is illegal. Though I should point out that in this case, the man wrote a few comments on the poster, something like 5 more years of stupidity, and another comment, and then also drew the dick on Duda's face. And the court threw out the statements, but continued to prosecute him when it came to charge him when it came to the actual penis picture drawing.
Kind of hard to
my understanding it would be that political opinions are, of course, protected or allowed, and they would say that those statements were political statements. but the actual drawing was no longer a political statement, but an insult. And I think that's kind of a fine line, because I
It
think
wasn't a
if you're
political
insulting a
penis,
head of
it was an
state,
offensive penis, basically. So yeah. This
yeah,
issue has been
exactly.
in the news several times over the last few months. As we see more and more street protests and social activism in Poland. For example, when they combine, for example, the LGBT rainbow flag with the Polish flag, or I've seen the Black Madonna of Częstochowa put, for example, on a rainbow flag, or various other political causes where they kind of connect icons or symbols of the Polish state. This subject comes up. What is and what isn't allowed, and how much of a hard ass the prosecutors are going to be when it comes to taking action against this kind of thing. And I think it's something we'll see going forward into the future too. People will continue to test it. And I'm curious about, if the government's going to kind of, insist on enforcing this law, or kind of take a more flexible approach to it. What do you think?
I think they'll insist on enforcing it when the next election cycle comes around, or if it's a publicized case, because this happens all the time. And sometimes the police or the prosecutors will go after the perpetrators. But the question is how many resources they want to throw behind this, how publicized the story is. And then when it finally gets to court, will the court decide to hear it? Will they throw it out? Will it be appealed? It's because, like in the case of this campaign poster, which was defaced, you could consider it political speech. So the court threw out part of that prosecutor's charge. But in other cases, if they can show that it's mainly used to insult or to hurt somebody's feelings, that's against the law. That's with the Matka Częstochowska and the rainbow flag. There are laws in Poland when it comes to insulting religions as well. Not specifically just the Catholic Church, but generally insulting religious sentiments and symbols. The laws are very grounded and specific when it comes to that. And then the question is, well, putting a rainbow flag on there insulting or not? That's a whole new can of worms to open up. And you also have to ask yourself, what was the intent of the person who did that? Was it a political statement? Was it meant to be an insulting statement? To the person doing that to know that it might insult somebody or offend somebody and decided to do it anyway? These are hard things to prove and go through courts, get through the courts. So, it's interesting to see where this will go.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see the High Court's opinion on penises as political statements, but we'll devote a segment to that maybe in a future show. Let's move on to the subject of smog, which hasn't really popped up on our radar too much lately, which is surprising given the time of year. However, and this is going back about a week and a half now, and a few days before the Christmas season really started, I think the 16th and the 17th, the smog got really bad there for a few days, 5 or 6 times the allowable limit, whatever that is. And there were a couple of days when the public transport was made free. If you don't know, this started, 3 or 4 years ago, where if we exceed certain limits when it comes to particulate matter in the air, they make public transportation free. The idea is it encourages people who would otherwise use their cars to leave their cars at home and hop on the tram or the bus. Dr. Mike, do you think this policy that we again continue to use with the free transport, do you think this puts a dent in the smog problem at all?
To be honest, I have my doubts. First of all, I haven't seen too many studies because, like you said, this policy has been out there for a couple of years. It's been implemented numerous times, and they've never actually shown that on those days then that the smog level goes down because there are less cars, because more people are taking public transportation. It's curious to see if that's the case or not, but they haven't presented that case. We also have to remember that this is 2020. A lot of people are working from home. Car traffic has generally been quite heavily reduced compared to other years.
Way down.
And the smog season usually correlates very much so with the season when it gets colder and people start heating their homes. It also means the temperatures are lower, atmospheric conditions change. So generally fog and smog are more likely to happen. So it's kind of a cumulative effect of the car traffic, the increased production of, say, fuels being burned for heat, and the weather conditions changing all mean that it becomes more likely that smog will form and stay. I mean, we have to remember that KrakCast topography is such that basically anything that gets blown into here smog-wise stays here and lingers for a while. And generally that's the case with a lot of southern Poland. because of the way the mountains are positioned, wind patterns, stuff like that. Smog has a tendency to build up around here. And that's one of the main reasons that the city brought in these policies to cut back on car traffic, trying to do something. But I don't think the car traffic is that big part of the smog problem. I mean, it might help.
I don't think this
policy
works for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's aimed at a very, very small group of people. These are people, as I said a minute ago, who would otherwise drive to work or drive wherever, and instead leave their car at home and use public transport just because it's free. So they're going to save 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 zlotys instead of using their car. Okay, maybe. I mean, sorry, the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is what what they would otherwise pay to use the tram or bus, but it's free. So I don't believe there are too many people who are happy to leave their car behind and maybe do the right thing, environmentally speaking, by using the tram because it's free. I think that's a tiny fraction of the population out there, right? On top of that, the announcement that public transport will be free, we usually learn about it on the day that it's free. We read the papers and we say, and we see today the buses and trams are free. So you learn about it maybe after you're going to get up and go to work or on your way to work or whatever, because the decision,
you hear it on the radio on your car.
The decision is typically made very late in the afternoon or maybe even in the evening the day before. And so there's no effective way to get the word out, to contact the people who would respond to this kind of thing unless they are actively following the news, which they may or may not be doing. And so I think it's good in theory, but it just doesn't work. And on top of that, as you just mentioned a second ago, given the COVID times, people working from home, et cetera, road traffic is way, way, way down. I don't have any numbers to back this up. I can just tell you anecdotally, I drive from time to time, and I can tell you it is at least half. It is at least down by at least 50%. Absolutely no question about that. And it has been that way for a good, 8 months at this point, right? Something like that. Since
pretty much, yeah, that sounds right.
Let's say April, May. So let's say 7 months, fine. So my question becomes, if the traffic is way, way down, and it has been down for so long, and we still have this very severe smog problem, isn't it finally time that we admit that cars are not at the root cause of the issue? Why can't we just finally look at the numbers? People who always, claim to be, motivated by science and the facts and the figures and the numbers. Well, the numbers say that cars have basically nothing to do with smog. And as you said, the geography of this area is such that we probably had smog before the Industrial Revolution. If we turned off every car and turned off every chimney and everything else, we would still have smog. It's just the way it is. So are we ever going to change our habits, or are we stuck in this kind of pattern of doing things that we think helps, but really doesn't?
I mean, a lot of this is just basically virtue signaling on part of the local governments that they're doing something, because just about anything else they would want to do would take a lot more time, money, and effort. Here, they can just, ban cars or limit car traffic. It's, and it's something that we all see. We look out the road and we see these cars driving by, with gases coming out of their exhaust. So we just naturally connect the two with the smog in the air. And even when we see less cars, we think there's less smog, or we think that's a major part of it. And of course,
that's how we think, and it makes sense.
Yeah, but a large degree of the problem here is, as if we were mentioning the topography, but the fact that yes, they banned wood burning and coal burning stoves and furnaces in Krakow, so everybody had to switch over to either centralized heating or gas furnaces. But still, all the cities around, or the towns around Krakow, didn't bring in that type of those types of restrictions. And remember, a lot of people that work in Krakow live on the outskirts of town, and they can still use furnaces there. Though I would argue that's also nowhere near as big of an impact as some people might say, because over the last 20 years in Krakow, the number of those furnaces was dropping dramatically, because every time somebody built a new house or apartment, you usually installed new gas stoves or central heating, or didn't put new furnaces in each apartment the way it were in decades past. So the number of furnaces like that was going down dramatically all the time. And the new housing around the city in these local towns, same story. It's every time a new building was being built,
let me ask you something.
New furnaces, not old ones.
As you say, and you're right, these anti-smog measures are basically Krakow city government rules, and maybe Małopolska rules, maybe. But the whole country knows that we have like the worst air in the European Union. Obviously, Brussels knows that we have the worst air in the European Union. Why isn't there a national policy on forbidding the burning of garbage or other waste for heating? I mean, why
Well, generally, it is illegal to burn
is necessary to make any progress on this, not local or regional issues.
It is illegal to burn trash and plastic in your furnace at home anyway. The only problem is it was very difficult to inspect and check who's doing that. I mean, you could have your neighbor call the police that it smells like something funny is burning in your furnace. But until a few years ago, they really couldn't do anything about it. Now they can come and inspect and check. But that's complicated. It's hard to do. So they basically did in lots of regions. Krakow, one of them, is basically just outright ban those kinds of furnaces. So even though somebody might have been burning high quality solid fuels or just wood once in a while to have a nice fireplace going, during Christmas, like we had in my parents' house, they banned everything, because if there are no furnaces, then you don't have to worry about anybody burning plastic in those furnaces. We would need a policy like that in the whole country, though, to really make a damper on smog, and then on a lot of other sources of air pollution as well. But these kind of policies are difficult, expensive. If you're forcing people to get rid of these furnaces, you have to then give them some kind of substitute for that. So say gas furnaces, which are, if you're buying coal or wood to heat your home, or gas is a little more expensive. Plus, when you have a regular furnace that you can throw anything in there, one of the main reasons people burn trash is because it's cheap to heat your home that way. So even though you could save the gas, it's more efficient and cleaner, it's still going to cost people more money. So it's hard to convince them to switch over to gas. So then we need subsidies paid for by taxpayers to help these people that are sometimes very financially insecure and but need to heat their homes somehow.
It just seems that every year we have the same conversation. It's like we're rediscovering the same problem over and over, trying the same things that may or may not work, putting the emphasis on cars and car traffic instead of like really seriously cracking down once and for all, finally, on the people who I think are the real source of the problem, which is these people burning trash, burning whatever, dirty fuel, basically, usually in these small towns. Sorry if that sounds, a big city elitist, but it's a fact. And again, it's a huge subject every year from November to March. As I said, we have the same conversation. It goes the same every year. And then we forget about it for the summertime because we're tired of talking about it, tired of thinking about it. And then October, November comes around again and we start from zero. And it's just something that I've noticed, having been here for so long. It seems that we make very little progress on the subject, but oh well.
I'm confident that we could just chop out this little talk that we've had right now, this few minutes section, stick it into our episode that really release next year at the end of December, and it would fit perfectly. Just copy, repeat.
Okay, let's move on. Let's go to some political news here. Now, it's way too early to speculate on what's going to happen in the 2022 mayoral election in Krakow, but that's not going to stop us from doing exactly that. So let's talk about it. Some numbers popped up this week from some preliminary, what's the word I'm looking for? Not surveys, but polls, basically. Who do you favor in the
poll of polls? Yeah,
a poll of polls. 2022 mayoral election. Now, as we all know, Mayorovsky is the current mayor. Mayorovsky is serving his fifth term. Is that right? Fifth term? And
yeah, let's see. He started in 1896. So yeah, that sounds about right.
105th term. And when he decided to run, he said it was his last time. He was only running because the people of Krakow wanted him to run, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, over and over, he's made it clear that this is most likely his last time before he moves out the door, finally. But knowing what we know about him, anything is possible. But Dr. Mike, it seems like the same names pop up in the discussion all the time. Łukasz Giełbała, who has tried several times unsuccessfully to win the election. Małgorzata Wasserman, who also is, I think she's come up short more than once. She made it to the second round against Mayorovsky in 2018. It seems that we have semi-permanent political class of the same people who are always in that, just one step, the position of being one step below the mayor's office, and they all have their eyes on the same prize. It seems like we choose from among the same people every single time. Do you see it going the same way this time, or maybe is there a Polish Donald Trump somewhere in the mix who could just show up and make things interesting, or you think we're going to choose from among the usual faces?
I mean, the polls that we've seen now regular coming out basically just look at the list of people that ran last time and throw those same people, survey those same people to see how people would react now if Majchrowski wasn't running again. And yes, Gibała and Wasserman, they both pop up and have a more likely chance of being in the runoff election, while Majchrowski looks like he wouldn't make it into the runoff election if he ran again, which is like the shocker right now. But, the city's not doing so well, coronavirus, and usually when moods are down and pessimistic, economically speaking, things are worse, and people are less likely to be supportive of the current government or leaders than they otherwise would be. And that's just kind of like a normal thing. Usually when the economies are good, incumbents win. When economies are bad, incumbents lose. So it's not really Majchrowski's fault, I would say, directly for why he's doing worse in this poll. But yeah, again, this is, we're 3 years out from the election. We don't even know if he'll be running or not. And from the candidates from the last election, we don't know how many of those would decide to run again. One of the people that keeps popping up is Kosiniak-Kamysz. He ran for, used to be the head of PSL. He ran for president of Poland this year, didn't do too well. But, he is from the Krakow area and generally quite popular here. And there's always the chance that maybe he would, if he didn't win the Polish presidency, maybe he would try for the presidency / mayorship of Krakow next couple of years. And, that would be a more interesting candidate. I think he could really mix things up here. And he's likely to do a lot better than some of these other candidates. But there's really, outside of him, I can't see too many other people stepping into the ring.
Is there any chance that our Lord and Savior, Jacek Majchrowski, might have a moment of clarity when he realizes that, in fact, he needs one more term to accomplish his goals? Do you think there's any chance he comes back for one more?
One more turn. You know what just you reminded me of? You remember the game Civilization? Just one more turn, kind of. It's one of those addictive role-playing games. And maybe he thinks he's playing a real-life Civilization here, building his empire. And just one more turn. And all of a sudden it's 6:30 in the morning. You got to go to work and you can't keep playing anymore. So maybe Majchrowski's a little demented that way and thinks he's just playing a 1990s video game on his Amiga PC or something like that.
Well, in the polls that I mentioned, his name, he was one of the choices, but he didn't make the top 3. But you know what? I would not bet against him. If he made it clear that he intended to run in 2022, I would not bet against him. It's just...
no, like I said, we're still a few years away. Yeah. We're still a few years away, and right now things aren't doing so well. So as an incumbent, he's getting the blame for that, or not getting a bump in the polls. But this is a poll in the middle of the election cycle, so It really doesn't mean anything. It's nice, interesting to look at these numbers and have something to talk about. But when it comes to the actual campaign and elections that we are still a few years out from, they mean absolutely nothing.
I think he's going to realize
Wasserman and Gibała could both be done by then. Who knows?
We'll see. Let's move on to something else that we've mentioned on our show a couple of times recently. Among the many, many, many new taxes and fees coming into effect on January 1st to the Polish government, which should be the richest government on the planet, but it isn't for some reason. But anyway, among the new taxes is a tax on those little bottles of alcohol that you see behind the counter when you go to Żabka. The Polish people, they call them Małpek, or is it Małpki, Dr. Mike? I can't remember.
Małpki, monkeys, little monkeys.
Little monkeys. It's kind of just like a slang term, obviously. And the new tax that's supposed to come into effect on January 1st targeted these things specifically by defining the subject of the new tax as alcohol with a certain, drinks with a certain percentage of alcohol, 40%, which is the vodka percentage, in a container of 300 milliliters or less, which targeted these Małpek specifically. Well, in a brilliant example of how the private sector will respond to efforts to damage their business, the producers of these drinks simply made the bottles slightly bigger. They made them 350 milliliters, which suddenly makes them not subject to this new tax. And this tax, there's a lot of money at stake here. I was shocked to discover, reading about this, I was shocked to discover that approximately 3 million of these bottles are sold every day in Poland. That's like roughly 9% of the country buying one of these bottles every single day. And the tax was supposed to be, was it about a zloty per bottle, I think? So let's say 3 million zlotys a day going into
I think that
yeah.
the tax was supposed to work in the sense that the middle companies, the one that actually sell this alcohol in bulk, for every 100 liters of alcohol that they sell in these kinds of bottles, there'll be an extra 25 zlotys to pay in taxes. And, that would, depending on how many bottles exactly they sold and stuff like that, that would break down differently. But yeah, this would have come up to about maybe a zloty per bottle or something like that, or a little less, a little more. But like you're mentioning, millions of bottles like this sold a day. I also read the stats saying that about 11% of the alcohol that is drunk by Poles is sold in this form. So it's a huge part of the market as well. It's surprising to think, but yeah, I see this at the corner shop near my place, where somebody who's a little down on their luck, let's put it that way, and smells a little funky, walks in, has enough change to buy some booze, and this is like the cheapest way to get the most bang for their buck, quite literally, are these Małpki bottles.
But wait, let's back up for a second here and remind everybody that the government justified this by saying it wasn't about money. Oh, no, they're above that. It wasn't about money. It was about protecting the health of Poles, right? It's trying to discourage drinking, basically, which is stupid because, well, not only is it stupid, but it's also a lie. I mean, of course, it's about the money. But it's stupid because let's just say, for argument's sake, that the tax goes through and these bottles go from being, I don't know, 4 zlotys a bottle to 5, or from 5 to 6 or something like that. So on a per milliliter basis, or on a per 100 milliliter basis, they're going to become significantly more expensive. And in comparison with bigger bottles, they're going to be a worse option. You're going to be better off on a per milliliter basis getting a bigger bottle. So I think a lot of people are going to say, you know what, instead of getting the Małpka for 6, I think I'll just get a small bottle for 10 or 12 or whatever. And I think there's a good chance that people will end up drinking more because of that, because it'll make the bigger bottles cheaper by comparison. Do you see what I mean?
I mean, these types of taxes, sin taxes, make no sense to me. I mean, first of all, the government shouldn't be in a position to decide what's good or bad for you to begin with. But that's another digression. But yeah, you're right. This just changes the incentive, motivational structure for people. So they'll decide to buy something else with their money that gives them the same kind of reaction. And these new taxes, it's not just alcohol. They've also introduced a new sugar tax for sweetened beverages, which is going to increase their price as well, more or less on the same grounds, for health reasons, of course.
Oh, of course.
But if it's for health reasons, they've also introduced a tax for beverages that are sweetened with artificial sweeteners. So your Coke Zero and stuff like that will also go up in price, even though it doesn't have sugar, even though the legislation says it wants to cut down on sugar consumption by increasing the tax on artificially sweetened beverages. I don't really see the logic there, but it's the same logic behind some of them.
Let's basically just say it's for soft drinks. That's basically what it is, for carbonated soft drinks. And it's fairly significant. It's going to drive the price up to a level that until now we have seen in gas stations, basically, a 2-liter bottle of Coke for 9 zlotys, for 8 zlotys or something like that. So that's going to be the price in supermarkets now. And the price at the gas station is going to be 12, or whatever, because, they still have the same margins they have to mark up, right? They still have, the same business reality still applies. And so the prices are going to go up significantly. And I think on a per liter basis, I think the sugar tax might be even more impactful than the alcohol tax. I don't know. The alcohol people responded by making the bottle bigger. I don't know if there's a similar kind of dodge that the Cokes and Pepsis of the world can kind of introduce to get around this. But I just think, at least in the short term, prices are going to go up quite a bit. And I'm curious to see, if you go to Żabka, the larger bottles of Coke or Pepsi, I think, when they're on sale, what is it like? They're like $4.50 a piece, 5 zlotys a piece, typically, right? And I think they're going to go. I think you're going to pay around 6 to 6.50, maybe 7 for the largest bottle of Coke or Pepsi and at a convenience store. And that's, it's a huge difference. And it's all going to the coffers in Warsaw. I'm sure they will spend it wisely, right?
Well, technically, half the money is supposed to be split like this. I know it's like this when it comes to the alcohol. I'm not sure about the sugar tax, but I think it's the same. Well, half of the money that they bring in is supposed to go to the gmina, so like the local municipality, county level, and the other half is supposed to go to NFZ, the National Health Fund. But we'll see how this money is split and where it actually goes in the long term, if they'll find a new way to earmark it and send it somewhere else, or if there'll be less money than they expected. So they'll decide like, oh, in that case, we'll do something else with it since there's not as much as we thought there would be. It's going to be a mess. I'm interested to see what's going to happen in a couple of months.
Left in 2020 to stock up on your small bottles of vodka and big bottles of Coke and Pepsi. So go ahead. Let's move on to a job listing that I saw in the news this week. Now, we all know that employment has been massively impacted by the coronavirus situation, but there is a little bit of opportunity here if you can play a trumpet, or at least one tune on a trumpet. We learned this week that the Krakow city government listed an opening for the Hejnał player in the Mariacki Church in the main square. As we all know, if you live in Krakow, obviously, if you listen to the KrakCast, you know it because it's at the beginning of our show. But every hour on the hour, 24/7, 365, forever, the trumpet player plays the Hejnał 4 times at the top of every hour, 96 times a day. And this goes back to way back to the Middle Ages when the church was getting permission from the city to build the structure that we see today. The city gave permission to build on the condition that one tower be given to the city as city property to serve as a watchtower. And it was run by the fire department because it was a fire watchtower, basically. I mean, they were looking out for like enemy armies too, but they were looking out for fires. And even to this day, technically, the people who work up there and play the trumpet, they are employees of the fire department. And so it's listed as a fire department job opening. Dr. Mike, I shared the documents with you. It's interesting. There are somehow, for some reason, 8 stages to the recruitment process, including like tests of physical fitness. There's one line in there about, can you play the trumpet, basically. And the working hours, they listed the working hours from 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. This is an unusual job with an unusual job listing.
Yes, it is. Yes, like you're saying, the hours are interesting because basically when you go up there, it's a shift position. So you're not working 8 to 9 to 5. You're working for the full day, full 24 hours, playing the trumpet 4 times every hour. In each direction. Another requirement is the fact that if there are any guests coming up there or visitors, tourists, that you also have to show them around and know what you're doing. And during certain times of the year, just special events, you're also supposed to be able to play other melodies on your little trumpet. Also, you have to. One of the steps as well is to test potential candidates for a fear of heights. Kind of makes sense since you're all the way up there. It would be a good idea not to be afraid of being up there. You also have to fulfill all the health and fitness requirements that firefighters have to fulfill. So there's also exercise and physical examination. I don't know if you have to run up a ladder and carry a fire hose or something like that. Even though the person they will hire isn't technically going to be working in the fire department in the firefighting sense, they still have to fulfill those physical fitness requirements. And there's like 8 steps in there about documentations, bureaucracy. It's quite a bit. It's like 6 pages of documentation just to see if you know how to play a trumpet.
You mentioned the fear of heights test. I noticed that if I understood it correctly, the fear of heights test consists of taking a ladder, like a fireman's ladder, and climbing 20 meters up. And I guess, like a ladder, like leaned against a building, that kind of 20 meters is, that's quite a bit. I don't know if I could do it quickly. Or
it's like 4 stories or something like that. Yeah, it's 4 or 5 stories.
20 meters up on a ladder to show you're not afraid of heights. And Dr. Mike, one thing that was missing from the job listing that I really want to know, I'm dying to know, is how much money they make. I really want to know how much money the Hejnał players make. What do you think?
I'm going to throw out there that it's probably not that much. They probably get, if they get in hand 3,000 zlotys, I'd be surprised. But, I'm guessing it's that ballpark figure, something like that. A little above minimum wage, but not that much more. The perk being here is that you're not doing that much. And for every day you work, you have 2 days off, because after a shift, you have 48 hours when you don't work. So, you're working basically 10 days out of a month.
Well, it's true that they don't do much. I mean, it is super, super prestigious, but I don't know if you get paid for prestige. But yeah, they don't do a whole lot. But I mean, it reminds me of in London, they have, what are they called? The beef eaters, like the Tower of London, right? The beef eaters. They don't do much either, but I would imagine they're pretty well paid because it's, again, such a high profile, prestigious position. I don't know. I mean, you could be right. Maybe it is less than 3,000. I was hoping for a little more than that, but I'm really, really curious to know. So if anybody listening has any information about how much money the Haynell players make, please get in touch and let us know because, yeah, we're just curious about it. Dr. Mike, let's wrap up.
Looking for a new job, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Let's wrap up with some news about New Year's Eve. We reported, I think 2 weeks ago, that the government, Morawiecki actually specifically announced some like serious major restrictions on New Year's Eve, like a curfew, basically having to stay home from 7 o'clock at night on the 31st until like 6 a.m. on January 1st. Obviously, anti-COVID corona measures, to keep everybody at home. And at the time, we talked about how this seemed basically impossible to enforce. I mean, just unimaginable how they can make the whole country stay home inside. I have no idea. But apparently just in the last few hours, we've learned about some kind of ease in these restrictions planned for New Year's Eve.
Exactly. It's basically, as we predicted earlier, that legally speaking, they really couldn't bring in this type of curfew without officially declaring a state of emergency or a heightened state, which the president would have to sign off as well, and other requirements would have to be fulfilled. Otherwise, the government has no powers to enforce this type of mandatory stay-at-home laws or regulations. So the prime minister went out there and said, like, okay, we're not doing this, but we're still going to appeal to you to stay home during New Year's Eve and not to shoot off fireworks. And I'm like, yeah, screw you. That's the only fun thing to do. And I think these restrictions, which are starting from the 28th, are hilarious, just like the flight coming in from infected England, UK, or the sugar taxes. They make no sense. For the last few weeks, malls and stores are open again. And then they said like 2 weeks ago, when they were still open, that they're going to shut them again on the 28th because things are getting worse. So they're getting worse and we have to do something, but we're going to wait 10 days before we do something. We're going to wait until after the shopping season is over. Oh, and things are so bad that we have to close off the Christmas market, the one that's outside on the square. We have to close that one down. But we're going to keep the malls and shopping centers that are indoors open for the Christmas holiday season, right, because that's somehow safer than an outside shopping area.
Obviously.
And these regulations basically say that after the 28th, shopping centers and malls will be closed again, with the exception of grocery stores and stores that sell this kind of like more basic things. So clothing stores, electronics, boutiques, and all that will be closed. But your Carrefours, your Zapkas, and things like that will be staying open. Basically like it was a few weeks ago before Christmas. And it's supposed to last until January 17th, I believe, when the winter school break holiday ends. So when the winter break ends, Feria, kids are supposed to go back to school normally, and then hopefully stores and things will be reopening as well. Well, we'll see what the numbers are, how things pan out, and then we'll see if the government decides to extend these restrictions for a longer period of time, or will they to stick to what they're saying now and open up again in the middle of January.
Yeah, January 17th is a very, very big, very important day for all of us. A lot of these corona policies and restrictions, even though they might seem inconsistent and maybe stupid, they are kind of coordinated to all kind of serve the same purpose, which is to get the world back to, or at least the Polish world, back to normal on Monday, the 18th of January. As you said, that's supposed to be when kids are supposed to go back to school. And I think the government, in a perfect world, they would like that to be the date when basically all of us go back to some measure of normality, whether it's reopening of stores, maybe reopening of restaurants, reopening of gyms and cinema, this kind of thing. So we're taking some bitter medicine now in the form of these lockdowns to hopefully get us to a point where on January 18th, we can kind of reopen up and get back to something like a normal life. That's the idea anyway. And we all have fingers crossed for that. And if it doesn't happen for whatever reason, I think we're all going to be disappointed. But that's the idea. So if you didn't know, January 17th is kind of like the last day, hopefully, theoretically, that everything should be this shitty, basically. And the 18th from there going forward, we should be in a different world. But I don't know. Who knows which way things are going to go? One more thing, Dr. Mike, I want to mention before we wrap up. I'm looking at this document, going back to the job listing for the trumpet player. I'm looking at the document now, and I noticed something I didn't see before. It has different standards for the physical fitness for men and women. Obviously, higher standards for men. Any thoughts on that?
Well, like I said, this is a trumpet playing position. So, men and women, as long as they know how to blow, that's all that really matters. But yeah, I can see for men and women, those standards being a little bit different. We have to bring in some lewd humor in this.
There's something
in this news cycle. There's nothing else going on.
There's something here I don't understand in Polish. I mean, you can tell me. One of the physical activities they test, it's called bieg po kopercia. Bieg, I get, but po kopercia? Do you know what that means? Kopercia, like envelope? Koperta? Po kopercia?
Yeah, I have no idea what that means. Maybe, I think koperta, I'm thinking like that's one of the terms they use for like parking spaces, which are, specifically for one type of car or another.
Well, because it's different.
I don't know if that's like running back and forth.
There are 3 activities they measure, and 2 of the 3 are the same for men and women. This bieg po kopercia and just general fitness. But the first one is different. For men, it's pulling a fire hose. And for women, it's throwing a medicine ball, those heavy medicine ball things. And so I don't know why they're different. Women, I guess, don't have to show how well they can pull a fire hose. Please don't make any jokes about that. Just leave that.
Sorry.
Leave it alone.
Okay.
Leave it alone.
You think? Yeah,
no, leave it.
Actually.
Okay, guys, that's going to do it for our news. As I said, just Dr. Mike and myself. And so on behalf of Dave and Josh, we wish you all a happy New Year. I think we're gonna post this episode right before the New Year. So whatever you end up doing, being confined at home, or curfew or no curfew, or fireworks or no fireworks, or whatever, happy New Year. Thanks everybody for listening in 2020. We look forward to 2021. Go to our website, KrakCast.pl. Check out all of our back episodes. And we'll catch you next year on the news.